Now, if you found the content of the last two videos difficult, it's time to turn around and get yourself an art degree, because what we're going to be looking at today is insane. The last few videos looked at classes and how we can divide a program up into classes to keep everything nice and neat. We also saw that classes have the ability to determine which parts of the program can access the content inside of it. Now, along the way, I mentioned that if we're going to be putting variables inside of our classes, we need to make sure that they are private. The reason for this is if you made them public, it would not only slow down your program considerably, but it would also give you errors along the way. What's the problem with this? Number one, errors suck. And number two, C++ prides itself with being an extremely quick language, so we really don't want any unnecessary slowdowns. We want to make those variables private. So you might be saying, let's just make the variables private and move on. Why do we need to have a whole video on this? Well, you're forgetting one thing. You're forgetting about the main. The main is still the spine of your program. The main is your friend. So are you really going to keep these private variables a secret from the main? The main works out. The main is pretty intimidating. I don't want to keep any secrets from him. He's going to beat me up. So we need to find a way to make sure that the main is happy, able to access the private variables, and the class is happy, able to keep the variables private. Now, the way we're going to do this is through public functions. Public functions are going to be a function inside the public section of your class. Now, anything inside of a class can access anything that is private inside of that class, and anything that is public inside that class can be accessed by the entire program. So these public functions will be able to access the private variables, and the public functions will also be able to be accessible by the entire program, more importantly, by the main. So, because the content of the last few videos was rather difficult, I'm going to start from scratch. So if you were a little bit cloudy on constructors or objects or classes or header files, I'm going to start from scratch here, so everything should be cleared up after this. So we'll start off with our preprocessor command in our main, include IOStream. Now we notice that we have a new class, so we need to include the header file. And when you're including the header file, you want to make sure you write it in quotation marks and not in triangle braces. So we'll go here, lemming.h. Next, we'll write using namespace std to define our namespace, and now we can write our main function. We're using integer data. We are expecting an integer back, and the integer we are expecting back is 0. We're all done for this part. Now, I mentioned that if we're going to have multiple CPP files in our program, you can just copy these preprocessor commands and namespace definition into them to save a little bit of time. It's not against the rules. Just leave it like that, and we're good to go. You do not need to do this inside of the header over here. Now, this code that we see inside of the header comes when you make the new file, so I'm just going to leave it there. Now, we're going to head in and we're going to write class, and we're going to write class lemming. Now, the lemming is the name of the class. You see it's the name of the file that I made here when I was pressing file, new file, and I wrote lemming. So that's the name of the class, so I'm going to keep it consistent and call it that. Now we're going to put curly braces, and remember that you will need to have a semicolon at the end of your curly brace when you're in your header file. You're going to go ahead and write public, which is accessible by the entire program, protected, which we won't look at today, but is accessible by things you allowed to be accessible, and you'll have private, which is only accessible by this class. Now I promise you guys we'll be dealing with a private variable, so let's go ahead and make it now. The private variable will be the integer turtle. So that is going to be the variable we're going to try to sneak out into the main. Now, we need to go to our lemming.cpp, which is our class file, and we are going to need to make some classes, or some functions, sorry. The first function we're going to make is the constructor. Now, the constructor is sort of an abstract idea. It's a little bit confusing to understand at first. You're always going to have one in your class file, and what it's going to do is every time you access the class in your main with an object, which objects are used to access the class and things inside the class, you're going to also call upon the constructor. Now, a way for me to give you guys a real-life example to make this seem a little bit clear, say you are walking into your house. You might be walking into your house to get something to eat. You might be walking into your house to go to bed. You might be walking into your house to go to the bathroom, or you might be walking in your house to go watch TV. There's a whole bunch of different things you can be doing when you walk in your house, but when you walk through that front door, you're always going to be stepping on the carpet. So the carpet always needs to be there if you're walking in your house. You can think of the carpet as the constructor. No matter what you're going in the class to get, if you're going to class to get a function or going to class to get a variable or all different types of things, you will still need to go through that constructor, and the constructor will be able to play whatever code it has inside of it when you access that class. So we start off by making the constructor by first doing this. We always write this no matter what we're doing. We're making a function for a class. We're going to name what class it is, and we're going to put two colons right after it. Now we're going to write the name of the function. We're going to call it the lemming function. We're going to name it after the class, and you'll put your curly braces, and anything inside of there is part of the constructor. Now we can print something out just so you guys can see exactly what's going on. We can write welcome. This message is brought to you by the constructor. Once again, it's not pertinent to what we're going to be learning today, but we're going to include it anyway just so we can know what the purpose of a constructor is. Now you notice we did not write anything for the data type of this class. We didn't write void, we didn't write integer, because your constructor does not have one. You don't need to write anything. So now we see an error here, right? Which means we didn't prototype the header of this function into our header file. So we'll go over to our header file, which corresponds to that class. Under public, you'll go and you'll write the name of the function. If you had a data type like void or integer, you would write it here before, like we see we did here with the variable turtle, but we don't have one. We'll see one in a second when we make our two other functions. So let's go ahead and make two other functions. We're going to make our first one is going to be called the set variable function. So you're going to still write lemming with the two colons. Then you're going to write set variable. And inside your bracket, you're actually going to write the parameter x, which is going to be an integer. Now this parameter x is not going to be held to the same restrictions as our integer turtle. Sorry. It's not going to be held to the same restrictions as the integer turtle, so it'll be able to help you sneak it out. We're actually going to go ahead and we're going to set turtle to x, which means the turtle variable and x are assigned to each other, which means wherever you see x, you get turtle, wherever you see turtle, you get x, and so on. So we have everything right here, but we are still missing something. What did I forget to do? Well, notice over here, I didn't indicate the data type. We're not dealing with the constructor here. We need to indicate what the data type is. Now in this case, do we want this function to give us something back? No, we don't. We just want this function to do something for us. The only function is we want this to be able to set turtle to x. We want to assign those together. That's all we want to do. We don't want anything back, so we're going to write void. Why waste any data? We don't need to call it an integer. We're not working with integers. We don't want anything back, so we're not returning anything. You can just call it void. You still have an error because we need to go and prototype that inside of the header file. So we're going to go in here. You're going to include the data type, and then you're going to write set variable, and you're going to include the parameter in there, just like that. Now we're going to go ahead and make one more. Now that we have managed to set the variable to a parameter, let's go ahead and actually go and make something that's going to allow us to return the value of turtle to the screen, which we'll use in the main. So we're going to go write integer, and we're going to do the same thing, lemming with two colons, and we're going to write get variable. Now we're trying to get the variable. We don't need anything inside of the brackets this time. We don't have any parameters, and we're simply going to write return turtle. And we're going to be using this inside the main to get turtle. Now we still have the error here because we have to go and prototype it right here. So we can go and prototype it, integer, get variable, and then nothing inside the brackets, and leave it like that. So now we have our class done. We have everything we need to do finished. We have the private variable that we want to try to get out, which is the integer turtle. We have our constructor here, which is not necessarily getting information on it, but it's there. We saw exactly what its purpose was. Next, we have our void set variable, which is going to be allowing us to control what the value of the variable is, the numerical value of turtle in the main. We can control it based on the fact that we have the parameter x ran through it. Now we also have integer of get variable here, which is going to allow us to print out the variable on the screen in a bit. So we can go ahead and we see here, we have all this here. Now we can move on to the main. Now we're in the main here. We're going to need to do one thing first. We want to access our class. And how do we access our class? We access the class by creating an object. The object can be anything. It does not matter what you name it. So we'll start off. You start off by writing what the name of the class is. The class is lemming. Simple enough. I've said the word lemming like a million times this video. Next, you're going to write what the name of the object you want to create is. You can call it anything you want. So let's just keep it extremely simplistic and call it lemming object. Really creative. So next we're going to go ahead and we're going to write lemming object, the new object we've created. You're going to put a dot separator, and now you're going to write the function you want to access. Well, I want to access the set variable function. Now I'm not going to write integer x inside of the brackets because I actually want to set it to a certain number. I'm going to set it to the number 55. This will allow us to set turtle equal to 55. Now that's great and all if I would just to press build and run now, but it's not going to let me know if anything happened because we're not printing anything out to the screen yet. So let's go ahead and use the other function we created, the get variable function, to see if we actually were successful in setting turtle equal to 55. So we're going to go ahead and print that out on the screen, see out. Now you want to access another function inside of the lemming class. We still need to use that lemming object. We need to use that key to open it up. So we're going to write lemming object. Once again, you can use the exact same one. It doesn't matter. Put the dot separator and write get variable. And you don't need to put anything inside the brackets. Just leave it like that and then end line like that. And now when we press build and run, we should be able to see that the turtle variable was set to 55. Now let's go ahead and build and run to confirm that this is true. The build has succeeded, and down here we see, here I can drag this here to give you guys a bit more space. We see that it says, welcome, this message was brought to you by the constructor because we accessed the, we created an object. So every time you create an object to access a class, you will call upon the constructor. So you see where it comes in, and right there we have 55. So exactly what we did. It was complicated. It was a little bit crazy, but in the end it works. So we can take a look at this one last time just to clear things up. We see in here we have three functions. We have the constructor, which I'll ignore for now. Now we have a void set variable function, which is not returning any value to us, and it's passing the parameter x through it, and we're going to be setting turtle equal to the parameter x. The x is not being held to the same restriction as the turtle variable, which is private inside of the class lemming. Now down here we actually have get variable, which is going to allow us to return that private value to the screen, and we're obviously having permission to do that because we've set it to the parameter x. We'll be able to return that to the screen, which we used in the main over here to print it out to confirm that it actually worked. And here, instead of writing integer x here, we set it to 55. That would mean since turtle is equal to x, that means we'll be setting turtle to 55. And then we return turtle to the screen over here with get variable, and we arrive at the end. So it is confusing. I would recommend watching this video twice, and feel free to leave any comments in the comment section below if you would like clarification. I know this is probably going to be the hardest video of C++ in my opinion, so it's great if you guys can understand this perfectly before moving forward. So make sure you ask questions below. I'll answer them as soon as possible. Thanks for watching, and have yourselves a great day.